My name is Bob Fisher, and I'm on the Environment Committee with the Weigent-Hogan Neighborhood Association in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm a forester by training. I have an undergraduate degree from the University of Illinois in forestry, and I've operated a tree and shrub care company called Nature's Way for about 30 years here in the city of La Crosse. And I get asked a lot of questions about trees, and I've done pruning workshops and planting workshops. And frankly, I thought that it's about time that we just did a simple tree selection workshop. And why do we plant trees? And broadly speaking, what type of trees should we plant? So the first question that comes up, of course, is why plant a tree? Well, we plant trees for many reasons. They provide shade in summer. They provide wind protection. They many times have pretty flowers and or fruit. They have pleasant fall leaf color. They add architectural accent to our homes. They increase property values. They have interesting bark, crown, shape, and pleasing form. And of course, there's always that social custom. Every house needs a tree. Trees are good and trees are bad. Properly chosen and spaced, they can increase property values by as much as 20%, a well-landscaped yard. They make the air smell fresher. It's known that they filter out various particulate pollutants. And in the summertime in particular, we can smell the air being cleaner and fresher under a tree. Properly placed, trees can shade a house and reduce air conditioning costs in the summer. Trees add beauty and calmness. Trees are bad in some people's minds. They're big and tall and they may fall on things. Trees poop. They drop leaves, fruit, and woody debris. Not all trees have pretty flowers or leaves. Some trees have offensive odors or allergenics. Tree roots or shade prevent a proper lawn. Two factors to consider when choosing a tree. There's the scientific factor. Trees are living organisms. They have a range of tolerance. They may be too wet, too dry, too hot, or too cold. A palm tree in Wisconsin is an obvious mistake, but it is not prudent to attempt to grow a healthy tree that is planted in an area well out of its native range or natural habitat just because it looks nice or you like it. Other more subtle defiances of science are made, even by professional landscapers. Don't force the wrong tree into the wrong environment. Learn where certain trees grow naturally and mimic that. In addition to the broader geographic range of a tree, microclimatic habitats exist, even within a small urban lot that may favor or hinder a tree's overall success in a specific location. That's the scientific factor. We can't force a tree to be healthy in a condition where it wouldn't normally grow. The other factor that I alluded to earlier was beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Not everyone has the same taste or the same belief of what is beautiful. Some want a manicured formal garden and others want a native wild look. Some trees by nature have a more formal appearance and can be pruned to a more refined shape, while other tree species have an incoherent, wild appearance and never accept being urbanized. Some trees have uncouth habits and drop smelly fruits or grow sharp thorns or emit allergenic pollens. These traits must be considered as part of nature. Trees must be chosen to meet their needs, not the garden designers. You shouldn't buy an elephant for a pet and then complain because it has gotten too big. The cute little spruce tree in the 5-gallon pail planted next to the driveway becomes Treezilla and will not lend itself well to pruning back into smaller trees. There are two main categories of trees. Evergreens, and I will add, not all pines are evergreens. It's very common for anyone to identify a, quote, pine tree as a pine tree. And that's all right, we arborists accept that because I can't always identify fine cuisine or fine wines. So, but one of the major trees planted for ornamental purposes is spruce. Now, spruce is not native in the immediate La Crosse area, but it's commonly planted. Spruce can be identified from fir, which is a very similar appearing tree, by having square cross-section needles. Just take a needle of a spruce tree or of a tree that you're not sure what it is and roll it between your fingers. And if it actually rolls between your fingers and you can feel the little ridges on it, it's a spruce. And spruce cones hang down, whereas a fir tree, the cones point up. As I said, no spruce are native in the immediate La Crosse area, but some of the common spruce trees planted are white, blue, and Norway. And everyone knows the blue spruce, as it's called. This is native to Colorado, but not to Wisconsin. White fir is a better choice for a similar appearing tree because it's not as prone to the diseases that blue spruce is. Norway spruce are kind of the dark, somber spruce that hang down kind of droopy. Fir is a common tree. We're all familiar with a balsam fir Christmas tree. Fir have a flat needle. If you take a needle from a fir tree and rub it between your fingers, it'll just continue to be flat. You won't feel it rolling back and forth. And as I said earlier, the cones grow upright. Again, no fir is native in the immediate area. The fir trees that are common in Wisconsin are balsam fir, and they are a good 200 miles north of here. Rising winter temperatures will put further stress on fir trees, and they will not really be a very good tree to continue to plant in the La Crosse area. Yew, Y-E-W, is another tree commonly used. It's mostly in shrub form. They are native in areas around La Crosse, but the common tree form is not native in the La Crosse area. They're kind of finicky in their habitat and are usually not recommended for extensive planting in La Crosse. Juniper trees we're all familiar with. These are the old field trees, as they're called, and they grow in old fields and savannas in the La Crosse area. They're the alternate host for some apple diseases, so beware of planting them if you also want to grow an apple orchard or your neighbor has an apple orchard. They're kind of rough and wild looking trees. Arborvitae, or northern white cedar, is the very common tree with the flat evergreen needles that we see throughout the city. It's not a common native in the area, although it does grow in the Kickapoo Valley area. It is very common in landscaping and often is described as the rocket ship of the ubiquitous gumdrop and rocket ship landscape design, with the two arborvitae at the either corner of the house and the rounded form of arborvitae and next to the door. Another evergreen, which we can class it as, that is not actually evergreen, it is a coniferous tree, and that's the larch or the tamarack. These aren't commonly used as an ornamental tree, but they're kind of a niche tree in a designed landscape. It is native locally, particularly up in the Centerville area of Trempealeau County. Two other trees that are not native to Wisconsin are bald cypress, which is native to about as far south as southern Illinois. But it is rather common ornamental in southern Wisconsin. It loses its needles in the wintertime as a natural botanical factor, and it likes a moist habitat but not a swamp. In its native range, it can get quite large. There is at least some native bald cypress, or not native bald cypress, but planted bald cypress on the University of Wisconsin campus in Madison, and there is one on the UWL campus. Metasequoia is a strange tree. Don't confuse it with the giant sequoias of California or the redwoods of California, which it somewhat resembles. Metasequoia, like the ginkgo tree, is a living fossil with no present native range. It loses its needles in the fall, but is sometimes used as a novelty or special interest tree in landscaping. It can be quite large, so be careful where you plant it. Then there are pines, the common evergreen that's frequently used in landscaping. White pine is native to our area, and red and Scots pine are frequently planted as forestry plantations, as well as used in landscaping. Austrian pine closely resembles red or Norway pine, but has its own unique suite of diseases and insect problems and should not be encouraged for further use. Pines are genetically programmed to be tall trees, and trying to keep them confined as hedges or smaller specimen trees can take on major expense and effort. All pines have various needle diseases, and insect pests can be fairly maintenance intensive even without pruning concerns. The other major group of trees is deciduous trees. These are trees that lose their leaves in the fall, even though we learned that some coniferous or quote evergreen trees also do. Most native trees in our area and most trees in our landscape are called deciduous or leaf losing. Even in winter, trees have a majestic beauty, and yes, it is possible to identify trees without their leaves. Maple is the name so common it's sometimes used as a shorthand term for any deciduous tree. Most arborists now shy away from recommending maples. Overplanting any genus is biologically dangerous, as disease or insect can cause a loss to many neighborhood trees. Dutch elm disease and emerald ash borer insect are two good examples. Asian longhorn beetle, which attacks maple, is a pest lurking in the wings to attack maple and other deciduous trees. Common deciduous trees used in landscaping are maple, which is, as I indicated, the most common and overplanted landscape tree. Not all maples have notable fall color. There are many species for various uses and sites. Some get very big, some remain petite. Elm was a very common street tree, and then Dutch elm disease hit. There are now some disease resistant, and I stress resistant, not absolutely immune. There are some disease resistant elm trees, and the city has been planting those in our neighborhood, but it should be used sparingly. Linden or basswood tree, it goes by either name, or tilia if you like to Latinize it. This is a common landscaping tree. Unfortunately, the leaves are very prone to attack by Japanese beetle. And while it doesn't really kill the tree, it can diminish its landscaping, which is supposed to be for beauty. When the leaves are attacked by Japanese beetle, it can minimize its landscaping beauty. It has an interesting seed structure. The seed is out on a little twig sticking out from another device that grows out, and suddenly the botanical name escapes me. But nonetheless, it has a very distinctive seed and very nice flowers. And we've all heard of basswood honey. That comes from the basswood tree. Hackberry is a very common tree in the La Crosse area. It likes to grow on what I call the second bottoms. In other words, a moist, flat, former river bottom area, which much of La Crosse between the bluffs and the river is. It has the shape of an elm, the tall vase shape, very stylized New England streetscape look. Trouble with hackberry, they can develop branch weaknesses if not pruned properly when young. And these are the big trees that unfortunately we occasionally see that fall on houses or cars. That's not to shy away from hackberry, but just remember to keep them pruned properly. Honey locust is another common tree in our area. It's not really native out in the forest. It's very sparse and native in Wisconsin forests, but it is a native tree. It has the finer leaf structure. It has what are called pinnately compound leaves, and one of the benefits is it doesn't cast a very heavy shade. Therefore, people who like lawns and trees would like honey locust. Maple, on the other hand, has a very heavy crown and shade producing crown, and the roots are very close to the surface. That, again, going back to the scientific factor in that maple is a bottomland tree for the most part. The roots grow close to the surface because they don't have to go deep in its native habitat. And it is a shade-tolerant tree, meaning it comes up and grows in the shade of other trees and eventually will become what's called ecologically a climax species tree, meaning that it will survive because it can grow in the shade. Unfortunately, this means that lawns don't grow well under it. So if you want to have a lawn, don't plant a maple tree. And then oak trees, of course, we all heard of oak. Many people think that oak are slow growing. They may be slower growing than a silver maple or a box elder. That's not all bad. You plant an oak, you'll see it come to maturity in your lifetime, unless you're 80 years old. It's a long live tree, and the two major types of oak are red oaks and white oaks. And red oaks include pin oak and northern pin oak, and red oak and black oak, and white oak includes bur oak and swamp white oak. So there are various species within those two major choices. Other choices of deciduous trees and some of the more southerly trees should be considered in view of our general warming climate. There are serviceberries and aspens and various trees, and we'll go to that and see, because there are other limiting factors. Shade tolerance is a major factor in tree distribution in the forest and needs to be taken into consideration when you're doing tree planting in your home area. Trees tolerant of shade include most maples, basswood or linden, ironwood, and serviceberry. Trees intolerant of shade are white birch, aspen, white oak, and red cedar or juniper. Soil moisture is another site consideration. Trees preferring moister sites are most maples, basswood or linden, white oak, bitternut hickory, white birch or river birch, tulip poplar, white pine, and arborvitae. Trees more tolerant of drier sites are red oak, shagbark hickory, ironwood, red pine, and red cedar. Other site considerations when you are planting a tree in your yard, remember, are salt tolerance. If you live along a major highway or county highway where traffic may be moving a bit faster, and in the winter time they're going to have highway salt or road salt put down, and that's going to spray a long ways. You might not want to plant a intolerant tree that's intolerant to salt. Another thing to bear in mind if you live outside of the immediate city is deer tolerance. I've found that deer tend not to venture west of the Burlington Northern Railroad tracks. Between the Burlington tracks and Losey Boulevard, we don't find much between Losey Boulevard and the river in terms of deer within the city of La Crosse. Nonetheless, I know that sometimes people do see them, but mainly you don't want to plant, for example, an arborvitae if you live out in the suburbs or up in the bluffs, because deer find that like ice cream. Wind tolerance is another factor you want to bear in mind. A very windy area and planting a heavy crowned tree like a maple can lead to long-term problems. You also want to consider when you plant a tree, where might you be planning on expanding your house? In other words, are you going to add another room or a patio? Why plant a tree where you think you may be expanding your house later? Even if you don't cut the tree, that tree suddenly will be closer to your house because you built the house closer to the tree. There's nothing more sad than having to take down a beautiful tree just because the bedroom expansion has moved out next to it. And also, don't plant trees along a lot line. Do you really want the hassle of a lot line tree? Planting a row of arborvitae or juniper for a windbreak along a lot line where the individual trees are not specific may be okay, but don't plant the big beautiful specimen tree too close to the lot line, because this can result in problems later on with pruning the limbs over your neighbor's lawn, etc. These are just several of the things you want to consider when planting a tree. On the neighborhood website, I have placed several documents from both University Extension and the Department of Natural Resources that describe trees in far more detail than I have here. And I advise you to go to that site and look at those documents. And also, I've prepared some essays and blogs that are also on that same site that expand on some of the things that I've spoken about. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at my personal email, rfisher1251@gmail.com, or contact me through the Weigent-Hogan Neighborhood Association website or Facebook page. I'd be glad to discuss any tree selection issues with you. Thank you.